The four friends Mark, Jason, Emily, and Sarah stand at the edge of the forgotten trail, the map in Mark's hand already feeling useless as the sun dips behind the ancient pines of Yosemite National Park. The air is unnaturally still, and the only sound is the distant call of a raven echoing through the trees. They planned this trip 4 months, drawn by rumors of a hidden waterfall deep in the forest, a place untouched by tourists. As they step off the main path, the forest seems to swallow them whole. The light fades quickly, and the temperature drops, their laughter dying in their throats. As the trees close in around them, every step forward feels like a step away from safety, and the silence grows heavier, pressing against their ears. Mark tries to joke about the legends of lost hikers, but his voice sounds small and uncertain. The group presses on, unaware that with every step the forest is changing behind them, the path back slowly vanishing, replaced by a wall of shadows and ancient twisted roots. The deeper they go, the more the forest seems to shift around them, the trees growing closer together, the undergrowth thicker and more tangled. The friends begin to notice how quiet it is. No birds, no insects, just the sound of their own footsteps and the occasional snap of a branch underfoot. The sense of unease grows with every step, and they all feel it even if no one wants to say it out loud. As they move deeper into the woods, the sunlight fades almost completely, the trees so close together that even the midday sun can barely pierce the canopy. The air feels colder, and a strange earthy smell hangs heavy around them. Emily stops suddenly, her eyes wide, claiming she heard footsteps behind them, but when they turn there is nothing but the endless rows of trees. The group's nerves begin to fray. The silence is broken only by the crunch of leaves underfoot and the occasional snap of a distant branch. Jason tries to use his phone for GPS, but the screen flickers and dies, leaving them with only the unreliable map and a growing sense of dread. The deeper they go, the more the forest seems to change shapes, moving in the corner of their eyes. Whispers on the wind that sound almost like voices. The friends press closer together, their breaths visible in the cold air, each of them feeling the same unspoken fear that they are not alone, and that something in the forest is watching, waiting for them to go just a little further. The path behind them is gone now, replaced by a wall of tangled roots and shadows, and the realization sinks in that they are truly lost. As the last light of day disappears behind the trees, Mark, Jason, Emily, and Sarah set up their small camp in a clearing that feels too quiet. The air is colder than they expected, and the forest around them is so dense that even the sound of their voices seems to get swallowed by the darkness. They try to make a fire, but the wood is damp and the flames are weak, barely pushing back the shadows. Mark tries to keep everyone calm by telling stories about other hikers who got lost in these woods, but his voice is shaky and his eyes keep darting into the trees. Emily sits close to Sarah, her arms wrapped around her knees, and she whispers that she feels like something is watching them. Everyone tries to laugh it off, but even he cannot hide the fear in his eyes. The silence between the sounds is almost unbearable, and every crack of a branch or rustle of leaves makes them all jump. As the night grows deeper, the friends realize that the forest is not just a place, it is a presence, something ancient and alive that is watching them from the darkness. As midnight approaches, the whispering starts. At first, it is so soft that they think it is just the wind, but soon it grows louder and more distinct. It sounds like voices speaking in a language one of them understands. The friends huddle closer to the fire, their eyes wide with fear. Suddenly a cold wind sweeps through the clearing and the fire sputters out, plunging them into total darkness. Panic sets in as they scramble for their flashlights, but the beams barely cut through the thick blackness. Emily starts to cry, saying she can feel something moving between the tents. Mark tries to calm her, but his own hands are shaking. The whispering is all around them, now growing faster and more urgent. The friends realize they are not alone in the forest, and whatever is out there does not want them to leave. They sit in the darkness, listening to the voices and the sound of something moving just beyond their sight. The night stretches on, and none of them can sleep. Every time they close their eyes, they feel as if something is standing over them, watching and waiting. When the first pale light of dawn finally breaks through the thick canopy, Mark, Jason, Emily, and Sarah are exhausted and shaken by the night. They step out of their tents, hoping that the morning will bring relief. But the forest looks even more unfamiliar. In the cold grey light, the path they followed the day before had gone replaced by a tangled wall of undergrowth and twisted roots. Mark checks the map again, and that nothing matches their surroundings. The trees seem closer together, and the air is thick. With mist, Jason suggests retracing their steps, but every direction the same. The friends argue about which way to go, their nerves fraying. As the realization sinks in that they are lost, Emily insists. She hears footsteps behind them, but when they turn there is only silence and the endless forest. The sense of dread grows heavier with every passing minute. The friends try to stay together, but the forest feels like it is closing in on them, and every step forward feels like a step deeper into a nightmare. They decide to move in what they hope is the right direction, but the forest seems to twist and shift around them, every landmark unfamiliar, and the sun is hidden behind thick clouds. As they walk, the whispering returns, softer now, but always just out of reach. Sarah stumbles and falls, scraping her knee on a sharp root. As Mark helps her up, he notices strange symbols carved into the bark of a nearby tree, symbols that look ancient and menacing. The friends exchange worried glances, realizing that they are deeper in the forest than they ever intended, and that something is leading them further away from safety. The feeling of being watched never leaves them, and every step forward feels like a step deeper into a nightmare. The friends press closer together, their breaths visible in the cold air, each of them feeling the same unspoken fear that they are not alone, and that something in the forest is watching, waiting for them to go just a little further. As the friends move deeper into the forest, the strange symbols begin to appear, more frequently carved into trees and rocks along their path. The shapes are unfamiliar and unsettling, twisting lines and jagged edges that seem to pulse with a dark energy. Emily runs her fingers over one of the carvings and shivers, saying it feels cold to the touch, even though the air is warm. Mark tries to reassure her, but his own voice is shaky and uncertain. The friends start to argue about whether they should keep going or try to find their way back, but the forest seems to close in tighter with every step. The whispering grows louder, and now it sounds like it is coming from all directions. The friends realize that they are being led somewhere by something they cannot see. The feeling of being watched is stronger than ever, and every shadow seems to move just out of the corner of their eyes. Suddenly Jason hears footsteps behind them, heavy and deliberate, as if someone or something is following them. He spins around, but there is nothing there, only the endless rows of trees and the shifting shadows. The friends pick up their pace, moving quickly through the forest, but the footsteps keep pace with them, always just out of sight. The whispering grows into a chorus of voices, chanting in a language they cannot understand. The friends are terrified now, running through the trees as the forest seems to twist and change around them. The path behind them disappears, and they realize they are completely lost, trapped in a place that does not want them to leave. The fear is overwhelming, and every breath feels like it could be their last. The friends slow their pace as exhaustion sets in, their breaths coming out in shaky clouds as they try to catch their bearings. The forest is so thick now that even the faintest light struggles to reach the ground. Mark leads the way, his eyes darting from tree to tree, searching for any sign of a path. But the only thing he finds are more of those strange symbols carved deep into the bark. The air feels heavier with every step, and the silence is broken only by the sound of their own footsteps and the occasional distant echo that seems to bounce between the trees. Emily clings to Sarah, her hands trembling. She whispers that she keeps hearing her name being called softly from somewhere far away. Jason tries to convince everyone that it is just their imagination, that even he cannot hide the fear in his voice. The friends stop to rest for a moment, and as they do, the forest seems to grow even quieter. The only sound is the pounding of their hearts and the soft whisper of the wind that almost sounds like voices calling them deeper into the woods. As they begin to move again, the echoes grow louder and more distinct. It is no longer just their names being called, but full sentences whispered in voices that sound eerily familiar. Mark hears his mother calling him from somewhere deep in the forest, even though he knows she is hundreds of miles away. Sarah hears the voice of her little brother, begging for help. The friends try to block out the sounds, but the voices grow more insistent, pulling at their minds and making it harder to think clearly. The forest seems to twist and shift around them, the trees moving closer together, and the path behind them disappearing completely. Panic sets in as the friends realize they are being lured deeper into the woods by something that knows their deepest fears and memories. The sense of dread is overwhelming, and they cling to each other, desperate for any sign of hope. As the forest closes in around them, the friends move deeper into the forest, their nerves fraying with every step. As the voices grow louder and more persistent, Mark tries to lead the way, but his hands are shaking and his eyes dart nervously from shadow to shadow. Emily clings to Sarah, her breath coming in short gasps as she whispers that she can hear her mother calling her name from somewhere just out of sight. Jason tries to keep everyone together, but the fear in his voice betrays him. The forest feels alive now, the trees pressing in closer, the air growing colder with every step. The ground beneath their feet is soft and uneven, and every now and then they stumble over twisted roots or sink into patches of mud. The whispering voices swirl around them, sometimes sounding like loved ones, sometimes like strangers, always just out of reach. The friends try to ignore the sounds, but the voices grow more insistent, pulling at their minds and making it harder to think clearly. The sense of being watched is overwhelming, and every time they look back, the path behind them is gone, replaced by a wall of darkness and tangled branches. As the day drags on, the friends begin to lose track of time. The sun is hidden behind thick clouds, and the forest seems to grow darker with every passing hour. Mark tries to check his watch, but the hands are spinning wildly as if time itself is broken. Sarah starts to cry, saying she can hear her little brother's voice calling for help. Jason tries to comfort her, but his own hands are shaking. The friends press on, desperate to find a way out, but the forest seems to twist and shift around them, every direction the same, and the voices grow louder, filling their heads with fear and confusion. Emily stumbles and falls, scraping her hands on a sharp rock. Mark helps her up. He notices more of the strange symbols carved into the trees. This time they seem to glow faintly in the dim light. The friends realize that they are being watched and hunted by something that knows their deepest fears and memories. The sense of dread is overwhelming, and they cling to each other, desperate for any sign of hope. As the forest closes in around them, as the friends push forward, the forest seems to grow even darker, the trees so close together that barely any light filters through the thick canopy. Leads the way, his flashlight beam flickering if the batteries are dying. Even though they are new, every step feels heavier, and the ground beneath their feet is soft and spongy, as if they are walking on something that is not quite earth. Emily clings to Sarah, her eyes wide with fear. She whispers that she keeps seeing shapes moving in the shadows just out of sight. Jason tries to reassure everyone, but his voice is barely more than a whisper. The air is thick with the smell of damp earth and something else, something metallic and sharp. The friends stop for a moment to catch their breath, and as they do, they hear footsteps behind them, slow and deliberate, as if someone or something is following them. Mark spins around, shining his flashlight into the darkness, but there is nothing there, only the endless rows of trees and the shifting shadows. The sense of being watched is stronger than ever, and every sound seems to echo through the forest, making it impossible to tell where anything is coming from. Suddenly the shadows begin to move faster, darting between the trees and circling the group. The friends huddle together, their backs to each other, as they try to watch every direction at once. The whispering voices grow louder, now overlapping and echoing through the forest. Mark tries to call out for help, but his voice is swallowed by the darkness. Jason's flashlight flickers and then dies, plunging them into near total darkness. The only light is the faint glow from the strange symbols carved into the trees around them. Emily starts to cry, saying she can feel something brushing against her arm, but when she looks, there is nothing there. The friends realize that they are surrounded by something they cannot see, something that is playing with them and feeding on their fear. The sense of dread is overwhelming, and they cling to each other, desperate for any sign of hope. As the shadows close in tighter around them, The friends stumble through the darkness, their flashlights barely working, as the forest seems to close in tighter. With every step, Mark tries to keep everyone moving, but his own fear is growing with each passing minute. The whispering voices are everywhere now, swirling around them and echoing through the trees. Sometimes the voices sound like strangers, sometimes they sound like people they know and love. Emily clings to Sarah, her hands shaking as she whispers that she saw a pale face watching them from behind a tree. Jason tries to convince everyone that it is just their imagination, but even he cannot hide the terror in his eyes. The friends stop to catch their breath and realize they have been walking in circles. The same twisted tree with the glowing symbols appears again and again. No matter which direction they go, the forest is playing tricks on them, trapping them in a never-ending loop of fear and confusion. The sense of being watched is overwhelming, and every shadow seems to move just out of the corner of their eyes. As they try to break free from the circle, the forest grows colder, and the air feels heavy with dread. Mark suggests they mark the trees as they go, but every time they look back, the marks have vanished, replaced by new symbols that seem to shift and change when no one is looking. Sarah starts to panic, her breathing quick and shallow, as she insists that something is following them and tries to calm her. But the fear in his own voice betrays him. The friends press on, desperate to find a way out, but the forest seems to twist and shift around them every direction. The same, and the voices grow louder, filling their heads with fear and confusion. Emily stumbles and falls, scraping her hands on the rough bark, and Mark helps her up. He sees a pale hand retreating into the shadows. The friends realize that they are not just lost, they are being hunted by something that knows their deepest fears and is feeding on their terror. The sense of hopelessness is overwhelming, and they cling to each other, desperate for any sign of escape. As the forest closes in around them, the friends move slowly out, their bodies aching and their minds clouded by exhaustion and fear. The forest is so dark that it feels like night, even though they know it is still day. Somewhere above the thick canopy leads the way, his flashlight being weak and flickering. He scans the trees for any sign of a path. Emily clings to Sarah, her eyes wide with terror, as she whispers that she can see eyes watching them from the shadows. Jason tries to reassure everyone, but his own voice is barely more than a whisper. The friends stop for a moment to catch their breath, and as they do, they hear a low growl coming from somewhere deep in the forest. The sound is so unnatural that it makes their skin crawl. The friends huddle together, their backs to each other, as they try to watch every direction at once. The sense of being watched is stronger than ever, and every shadow seems to hide something waiting to pounce. Suddenly, the eyes begin to move, darting between the trees and circling the group. The friends try to run, but the forest seems to twist and shift around them every direction. The same, and the path behind them disappears completely. The growling grows louder and is joined by the sound of footsteps crunching through the undergrowth. Jason trips and falls, scraping his hands on the rough ground. As Mark helps him up, he sees a pair of glowing eyes staring at him from just a few feet away. The friends scream and run blindly through the trees, their hearts pounding in their chests, the voices and growls chasing them through the darkness. The sense of terror is overwhelming, and they cling to each other, desperate for any sign of hope. As the forest closes in tighter around them, the friends finally collapse in a small clearing, their chests heaving as they try to catch their breath. The forest around them is so dark and silent that it feels like the world has ended. Mark tries to check his phone for the time, but the screen is dead and the battery is ice cold in his hand. Emily sits on the ground, hugging her knees to her chest and rocking back and forth as she whispers that she cannot take it anymore. Sarah tries to comfort her, but her own hands are shaking. Jason paces the edge of the clearing, shining his flashlight into the trees, but the beam barely penetrates the darkness. Every now and then he catches a glimpse of movement, a shadow darting between the trunks, or a pair of glowing eyes watching from the undergrowth. The friends try to talk about what to do next, but their voices sound small and hollow in the vast silence. The sense of hopelessness is overwhelming, and they all feel as if they are trapped in a nightmare that will never end. As the hours drag on, the darkness only seems to grow deeper. The friends try to rest, but every time they close their eyes, they hear the whispering voices and the sound of footsteps circling the clearing. Mark thinks he sees a pale figure standing just beyond the reach of the flashlight. But when he blinks, it is gone. Emily starts to cry, saying she can feel something touching her hair. But when she looks, there is nothing there. Jason tries to keep everyone calm, but his own fear is written all over his face. The friends huddle together in the center of the clearing, their backs to each other as they try to watch every direction at once. The sense of being watched is stronger than ever, and every sound seems to echo through the forest, making it impossible to tell where anything is coming from. The night feels endless, and the friends begin to wonder if they will ever see the sun again. The friends sit in the darkness, their bodies pressed close together, as they listen to the sounds of the forest. The whispering voices are louder now, swirling around them and echoing through the trees. Sometimes the voices sound like strangers, sometimes they sound like people they know and love. Mark tries to keep everyone calm, but his own fear is growing with every passing minute. Jason shines his flashlight into the trees, but the beam is weak and flickering, and every time he thinks he sees something moving, it disappears before he can focus on it. Emily clings to Sarah, her hands shaking as she whispers that she can feel something cold brushing against her skin. The air is thick with dread, and the sense of being watched is overwhelming. Every shadow seems to hide something waiting to pounce, and the friends realize that they are not alone in the forest. Something is out there with them, something that does not want them to leave. Suddenly, the temperature drops, and a thick mist begins to roll in from between the trees. The friends can barely see each other now. The fog is so dense. Mark tries to call out, but his voice is swallowed by the mist, and the whispering voices grow louder, circling the group and filling their heads with fear. Sarah starts to panic, her breathing quick and shallow as she insists that something is moving through the fog. Jason tries to comfort her, but his own hands are shaking. The friends huddle together, desperate for any sign of hope. But the mist only grows thicker, and the voice is more insistent. The sense of dread is overwhelming, and they all feel as if they are being hunted by something they cannot see. The night stretches on, and the friends begin to wonder if they will ever escape the forest, or is they are doomed to wander its endless darkness forever. The mist grows thicker until it feels like the friends are trapped inside a cloud. The world outside their small circle is nothing but swirling grey, and the trees have vanished into the fog. Mark tries to keep his flashlight steady, but the beam is swallowed by the mist and only lights up a few feet in front of him. Paces nervously around the group, his eyes searching for any sign of movement. Emily clings to Sarah, her voice trembling as she says she cannot see anything, but she can hear footsteps crunching softly in the leaves all around them. The friends try to call out for help, but their voices are muffled and lost in the fog. The whispering grows louder now, and the voices seem to come from every direction. Sometimes they sound like strangers, sometimes they sound like loved ones, calling them deeper into the mist. The sense of isolation is overwhelming, and the friends realize that they are completely cut off from the outside world. Suddenly the light from Mark's flashlight flickers and dies, plunging the group into near total darkness. The only illumination comes from the faint glow of the strange symbols carved into the trees, which now seem to pulse with a life of their own. Emily starts to cry, saying she can feel something cold and wet brushing against her skin. Sarah tries to comfort her, but her own hands are shaking. Jason tries to get the flashlight working again, but it is useless. The friends huddle together in the darkness, their breaths coming in short, panicked gasps as the whispering voices grow louder and more urgent. The sense of dread is overwhelming, and they all feel as if they are being watched by something that is getting closer with every passing second. The friends realize that the forest is alive, and it is closing in around them, trapping them in a nightmare from which there is no escape. The friends sit in the darkness, their bodies pressed close together as the mist swirls around them. The only sound is their own breathing and the soft crunch of footsteps moving slowly through the leaves just beyond their sight. Mark tries to convince himself that it is just an animal, but deep down he knows that something is stalking them, something that is not afraid of the dark. Jason grips a broken branch in his hand, his knuckles white, as he scans the fog for any sign of movement. Emily buries her face in Sarah's shoulder, her tears silent as she whispers that she can feel eyes watching her from the mist. The friends try to stay quiet, but every small sound seems to echo through the forest. The footsteps grow closer and then stop if whatever is out there is waiting for them to make a move. The sense of dread is suffocating, and the friends realize that they are being hunted by something that knows exactly where they are. Suddenly a cold hand brushes against Emily's arm, and she screams, the sound shattering the silence. The friends jump to their feet, their hearts pounding, as they spin around searching for the source of the touch. But there is nothing there, only the endless mist and the shifting shadows. Mark tries to calm everyone down, but his own voice is shaking. The footsteps start again, this time circling the group, moving faster and faster, as if whatever is out there is toying with them. The friends huddle together, their backs to each other, as they try to watch every direction at once. The whispering voices grow louder, now chanting in a language none of them understand. The sense of terror is overwhelming, and the friends realize that they are not just lost, they are being hunted by something that is not human and does not want them to leave the forest. The friends stand back to back in the swirling mist, their eyes darting in every direction as the footsteps circle them faster and faster. The air is so cold that their breath comes out in thick clouds, and every sound seems to echo through the trees. Mark tries to call out for help, but his voice is swallowed by the fog, and the only answer is the chorus of whispering voices that now sound angry and impatient. Jason grips his makeshift weapon tighter, his hands shaking as he tries to spot any movement in the shadows. Emily clings to Sarah, her whole body trembling. She whispers that she can see shapes moving just beyond the edge of the mist. The friends realize that the circle is closing in around them, the footsteps growing louder and the shadows moving closer with every passing second. The sense of being hunted is overwhelming, and they all feel as if they are standing on the edge of something terrible that is about to happen. Suddenly the mist parts for just a moment, and the friends catch a glimpse of something tall and thin moving between the trees, its body impossibly long, and its face hidden in shadow. Emily screams, and the figure vanishes as quickly as it appeared. The footsteps stop, and the forest falls silent. The friends are frozen in place, their hearts pounding, as they try to make sense of what they just saw. Mark whispers that they need to keep moving, but his voice is barely more than a breath. The friends stumble forward through the mist, desperate to escape the circle, but the forest seems to twist and shift around them. Every direction looks the same, and the sense of dread only grows stronger. The whispering voices return, now chanting louder and faster as if urging the friends deeper into the woods. The friends realize that they are not just lost, they are being herded by something that wants them to go exactly where it wants. The friends push through the mist, their legs heavy and their lungs burning as they try to escape the circle of shadows. Mark leads the way, his eyes fixed on a faint glimmer of light that seems to flicker between the trees. Jason follows close behind, gripping his broken branch like a lifeline. Emily and Sarah cling to each other, their breaths coming in short, panicked gasps as they stumble over roots and rocks. The whispering voices grow softer for a moment, replaced by the sound of rushing water. Somewhere ahead the friends feel a surge of hope, thinking they have finally found a way out of the nightmare. They move faster, their fear driving them forward as the light grows brighter and the sound of water grows louder. The sense of being watched fades just enough for them to believe that escape is possible. As they break through the last line of trees, the friends find themselves standing on the edge of a wide rushing river. The water is dark and cold, and the current is strong, but on the other side, they can see what looks like a trail leading up a hill. Mark shouts that they have to cross, but as soon as he steps into the water, the temperature drops even further, and the whispering voices return louder and more urgent than ever. The friends wade into the river, the icy water numbing their legs. As they struggle to keep their footing halfway across, Emily screams as something cold and unseen grabs her ankle, pulling her under the surface. Jason and Mark rush to help her, their hands slipping on the wet rocks as the current threatens to sweep them all away. The friends realize too late that the river is not an escape, but another trap set by the forest, and the sense of hopelessness returns stronger than ever. The icy water crashes around them as Mark, Jason, Emily, and Sarah fight to pull Emily back to the surface, her screams muffled by the roar of the river and the whispering voices that seem to rise from the depths. Mark grabs her arm, his fingers numb from the cold as he tries to hold on. Jason wades in deeper, nearly losing his footing as the current tugs at his legs. Sarah stands on the bank, her face pale with terror, as she reaches out for Emily. The water is so cold it feels like knives cutting into their skin, and the riverbed is slick with moss and sharp stones. For a moment, it feels like the forest itself is trying to drag them under the surface. The friends struggle together, their breaths coming in ragged gasps, as they finally manage to pull Emily free, her face white with shock and her eyes wide with terror. The friends collapse on the far bank, shivering and soaked to the bone. The sense of relief is short-lived as the whispering voices return louder than ever, echoing through the trees and the water. As they catch their breath, the friends realize that the forest on this side of the river is even darker and more twisted than before. The trees are taller, and their branches form a tangled canopy that blocks out what little light remains. The air is thick with mist, and the ground is soft and uneven. Every step feels like it could sink them deeper into the earth. Emily clings to Sarah, her body shaking as she whispers that she felt hands pulling her down under the water, hands that were ice cold and impossibly strong. Mark tries to reassure her, but his own voice is weak and uncertain. Jason looks back at the river and sees ghostly faces swirling just beneath the surface, their eyes wide and unblinking. The friends realize that the river was not a barrier, but a threshold, and that they have crossed into a part of the forest where the rules of reality no longer apply. The sense of dread is overwhelming, and they all feel as if they are being watched by something ancient and hungry. The friends move slowly through the new part of the forest, their clothes heavy with water, and their bodies aching from the cold. Every step feels harder than the last, as if the ground itself is trying to hold them back. The trees here are even older and more twisted, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The mist is thicker, and the air is filled with a strange sweet smell that makes their heads spin. Mark leads the way, his eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of a path, but the forest seems to shift and change with every step. Jason follows close behind, gripping his broken branch, while Emily and Sarah cling to each other, their faces pale with fear. The whispering voices are louder and now echoing through the trees and filling their heads with confusion. Sometimes the voices sound like their own thoughts, sometimes they sound like strangers calling them deeper into the woods. The friends realize that they have crossed into a place where nothing is as it seems, and the sense of dread grows with every passing moment. As they move deeper into the forest, the friends begin to notice strange shapes moving between the trees. Sometimes it is just a flicker of movement out of the corner of their eyes. Sometimes it is a pale face watching them from the shadows. Mark tries to keep everyone together, but the forest seems to pull them apart. The ground is soft and uneven, and every now and then one of them stumbles and nearly falls. Jason hears his name whispered from somewhere behind him, but when he turns, there is nothing there. Emily starts to cry, saying she can feel something brushing against her skin, invisible hands trying to pull her away. Sarah tries to comfort her, but her own voice is shaking. The friends realize that they are not just lost, they are being hunted by something that is always just out of sight. The sense of terror is overwhelming, and they cling to each other, desperate for any sign of hope. As the forest closes in tighter around them, the friends press on through the twisted forest, their nerves fraying as the whispering voices grow louder and more personal. Mark hears his own name spoken in his father's voice, a voice he has not heard in years. Jason hears his mother calling him home. Emily hears the laughter of her little sister, and Sarah hears her grandmother singing an old lullaby. The voices are so real that for a moment each of them forgets where they are and why they are afraid. Mark stops in his tracks, his eyes filling with tears as he listens to the voice of his father calling him deeper into the woods. Jason reaches out as if to touch something just beyond his grasp. Emily and Sarah cling to each other, their faces pale with confusion and fear. The friends realize that the forest is not just playing tricks on their eyes, it is reaching into their minds and using their memories against them. The sense of dread is overwhelming, and they all feel as if they are losing themselves to the darkness. Suddenly the voices turn harsh and mocking, repeating the friends' deepest fears and regrets. Mark hears the voice of his father telling him he will never make it out alive. Jason hears his mother crying for him. Inwardly hears her sister screaming for help, and Sarah hears her grandmother's lullaby turn into a warning. The friends cover their ears, but the voices only grow louder, echoing inside their heads and making it impossible to think. Mark tries to shout over the noise, but his own voice is lost in the cacophony. The friends stumble forward, desperate to escape the torment, but the forest seems to twist and shift around them every direction. The same, and the sense of hopelessness is crushing. The friends realize that the forest is not just a place, it is a living thing that feeds on their fear and pain, and it will not let them go until it has taken everything from them. The friends stumble through the forest, their minds battered by the relentless voices and their bodies weak from exhaustion. Mark tries to keep everyone together, but the forest seems to pull them apart. With every step the ground is soft and treacherous, and the trees twist in unnatural ways, blocking their path and forcing them to change direction again and again. Jason starts to lag behind, his eyes glazed as he listens to the voice of his mother, calling him deeper into the woods. Emily clings to Sarah, her grip tightening as she whispers that she cannot tell what is real anymore. Mark shouts for Jason to stay close, but his voice is swallowed by the mist and the whispering that never stops. The friends realize that the forest is trying to separate them, to break their will and make them easier prey. The sense of isolation is overwhelming, and each of them feels as if they are fighting the darkness alone. Suddenly Jason stops in his tracks, his face pale and his eyes wide as he stares into the darkness. Mark rushes back to him, grabbing his arm and trying to pull him forward, but Jason resists, saying he can see his mother waiting for him just beyond the trees. Emily and Sarah call out for them, but their voices sound far away, as if the forest is swallowing the sound. Mark pleads with Jason to stay with the group, but Jason's body trembles as he takes a step toward the shadows. The friends realize that the forest is using their memories and fears to lure them away from each other, and that if they let go even for a moment, they may never find each other again. The sense of terror is overwhelming, and they cling to each other, desperate to stay together as the forest closes in tighter around them. The friends cling to each other as they push deeper into the forest, their hands locked together in a desperate attempt to stay united. The mist is so thick now that they can barely see more than a few feet ahead, and every step feels like it could lead them further apart. Mark leads the way, his grip on Jason's arm unbreakable, while Emily and Sarah hold tightly to each other. The whispering voices are relentless, swirling around them and filling their heads with doubt and fear. Sometimes the voices sound like their own thoughts. Sometimes they sound like strangers urging them to let go and give in to the darkness. The ground beneath their feet is soft and uneven, and every now and then one of them stumbles, nearly pulling the others down with them. The friends realize that the only way to survive is to stay together, but the forest seems determined to tear them apart. The sense of dread is overwhelming, and they all feel as if they are walking on the edge of a nightmare that could swallow them whole at any moment. Suddenly, the ground shifts beneath their feet, and a deep crack opens in the earth, splitting the group into Mark and Jason on one side, Emily and Sarah on the other. The friends scream for each other, their voices echoing through the forest as the crack widens and the mist pours in. Mark tries to reach across the gap, but the distance grows with every passing second. Jason grabs his arm, pulling him back as the ground crumbles beneath their feet. Emily and Sarah cling to each other, their faces pale with terror as they watch the gap grow wider. The whispering voices grow louder, now mocking and triumphant, as if the forest itself is celebrating their separation. The friends realize that they are truly alone now, each pair trapped on opposite sides of a chasm that seems to have no end. The sense of hopelessness is crushing, and they all feel as if they have lost each other forever. On opposite sides of the chasm, Mark and Jason call out for Emily and Sarah, their voices echoing through the mist but sounding thin and distant, as if the forest is swallowing every word. Mark's heart pounds in his chest as he tries to find her way across the gap, but the earth is crumbling and the mist is so thick he can barely see. Jason stands beside him, his face pale and his eyes wide with fear. On the other side, Emily clings to Sarah, her hands shaking. She tries to keep her friend calm. Sarah's breathing is quick and shallow, her eyes darting around as if she expects something to leap from the shadows at any moment. The whispering voices are louder than ever now, swirling around each pair and filling their heads with doubt and fear. Sometimes the voices sound like the others calling for help, sometimes they sound like strangers urging them to give up and let the forest take them. The sense of isolation is overwhelming and each friend feels more alone than ever before. As the minutes drag on, the friends realize that the chasm is not just a physical barrier, but a mental one as well. The voices in their heads grow more insistent, whispering secrets and fears that they have never shared with anyone. Mark hears his own voice telling him that he will never escape. Jason hears the sound of his mother crying. Emily hears her sister's laughter turn into screams, and Sarah hears her grandmother's lullaby become a warning. The friends try to block out the voices, but the sound is overwhelming, filling their minds with terror and confusion. Mark and Jason try to find a way around the chasm, but every path leads back to the same spot. Emily and Sarah try to comfort each other, but the fear is too much, and they both begin to cry. The friends realize that the forest is feeding on their fear, and that the only way to survive is to fight back against the darkness. The sense of dread is suffocating, and they all feel as if they are being pulled deeper into the nightmare with every passing second. Mark and Jason stand at the edge of the chasm, their hands gripping the cold earth. As they search for any way to cross the gap, the mist is so thick that it feels like they are standing on the edge of the world. Jason's voice trembles as he calls out for Emily and Sarah, but the only answer is the echo of his own fear. Mark tries to stay strong, but the voices in his head are relentless, whispering that he is weak, that he will never see his friends again. The ground beneath their feet feels unstable, as if it could give way at any moment. Mark looks at Jason and sees the same terror in his eyes, but also a flicker of determination. The friends realize that if they give in to the fear, they will be lost forever. Mark takes a deep breath and tells Jason that they have to keep moving, that they cannot let the forest win. Together, they start to search for another way around the chasm, their steps slow and careful as the mist swirls around them and the whispering voices grow louder. On the other side, Emily and Sarah cling to each other, their bodies shaking as the voices in the mist grow more personal and cruel. Emily hears her sister's voice begging her to come home, while Sarah hears her grandmother warning her to run. The friends try to block out the sounds, but the voices only grow louder, filling their heads with doubt and despair. Sarah starts to cry, saying she cannot take it anymore, but Emily holds her tight, whispering that they have to be strong, that they cannot let the forest break them. The friends realize that the only way to survive is to fight back against the darkness, to hold on to each other and refuse to give in to the fear. Together, they start to move along the edge of the chasm, searching for a way to reunite with Mark and Jason. The mist swirls around them and the whispering voices follow, but the friends cling to hope as their only weapon against the nightmare. Mark and Jason move slowly along the edge of the chasm, their hands brushing the rough bark of the twisted trees as they search for any sign of a crossing. The mist is so thick that they can barely see each other, and every step feels like it could lead them further from safety. The whispering voices are relentless now, sometimes sounding like Emily and Sarah calling for help, sometimes turning into cruel laughter that echoes through the trees. Mark tries to focus on the sound of Jason's breathing, using it as an anchor in the swirling fog. Jason stumbles and nearly falls, but Mark grabs his arm, pulling him back from the edge. The ground is soft and unstable, and every now and then they hear the distant sound of rocks tumbling into the darkness below. The friends realize that the forest is trying to keep them apart, using every trick it can to break their will, but they refuse to give in. Mark calls out for Emily and Sarah, his voice hoarse with desperation, and for a moment he thinks he hears an answer from somewhere up ahead. On the other side, Emily and Sarah are doing the same, their hands locked together as they move through the fog, their eyes searching for any sign of Mark and Jason. The voices in the mist are cruel and mocking, sometimes sounding like the boys, sometimes turning into screams that make their blood run cold. Sarah starts to lose hope, her steps faltering as the darkness presses in. But Emily refuses to let go. She whispers that they have to keep moving, that they cannot let the forest wind suddenly through the swirling mist. Emily hears Mark's voice calling her name, shouts back, her voice trembling with hope and fear. The friends move faster now, following the sound of each other's voices. As the chasm begins to narrow, the sense of dread is still overwhelming. But for the first time, there is a flicker of hope that they might find each other again. The friends move quickly now, their voices guiding each other through the swirling mist as the chasm narrows to a jagged gap, barely wide enough to jump. Mark and Jason reach the edge first, their hearts pounding as they look across the darkness to where Emily and Sarah stand on the other side. The ground is slick with moss and the rocks are loose under their feet. The whispering voices grow frantic now and urging them to turn back or to leap into the void. Mark squeezes Jason's shoulder and tells him they have to try before the mist closes in again. Jason nods, his face pale with fear, but determined. Mark takes a deep breath and leaps across the gap, landing hard on the other side and nearly slipping on the wet stone. Owen follows. A moment later, his arms flailing, he barely makes it across. Emily and Sarah rush to them, tears streaming down their faces as they embrace the relief of being together again is overwhelming, but the sense of danger is still there, lurking in the shadows just beyond the edge of the mist. As the friends cling to each other, the whispering voices change, their tone becoming angry and spiteful. The mist thickens and the forest seems to close in tighter than ever. The ground shakes beneath their feet and the trees groan as if alive. Mark urges everyone to move quickly away from the chasm, but every direction the same. The friends stumble forward, their hands locked together as the voices scream in their ears. The sense of being watched is stronger than ever, and every shadow seems to move just out of sight. Emily trips and nearly falls, but Sarah catches her, pulling her back to her feet. The friends realize that the forest is furious, that they have reunited, and that it will do everything in its power to tear them apart again. The sense of dread is overwhelming, and they move as quickly as they can, desperate to escape the nightmare that surrounds them. The friends move as quickly as they can through the thickening mist, their hands locked together as the forest seems to come alive around them. The ground shakes with every step, and the trees groan and creak if they are trying to block the way. Forward, Mark leads the group, his heart pounding as he scans the shadows for any sign of a path. Jason follows close behind, his grip tight on Emily's arm, while Sarah brings up the rear, her eyes wide with terror. The whispering voices and now a deafening roar, filling their heads with fear and confusion. Sometimes the voices sound like their own thoughts, sometimes they sound like strangers screaming at them to turn back. The friends stumble over roots and rocks, the ground shifting beneath their feet as if the forest itself is trying to swallow them whole. The sense of being hunted is overwhelming, and every shadow seems to move just out of sight. The friends realize that the forest is furious, that they have defied its will, and that it will not let them go without a fight. Suddenly, the path ahead is blocked by a wall of twisted roots and branches that rise up from the ground, like the fingers of a giant hand. Mark tries to find a way around, but the roots move to block him, swings his broken branch, the tangled wood, but it does nothing. The friends are trapped. The whispering voices, now a chorus of screams. Emily clings to Sarah, her body shaking as she whispers that she can see faces in the bark of the trees, their eyes wide and mouths open in silent screams. Mark urges everyone to stay together, but the ground begins to split beneath their feet. The friends scramble to stay upright as the earth shakes and the mist grows so thick they can barely see each other. The sense of dread is suffocating, and they all feel as if the forest is about to consume them completely. The friends stand frozen. The wall of roots and branches towers above them, blocking every possible escape. The wood twists and writhes as if alive, the faces in the bark contorted in silent screams. Mark tries to pull at the roots, but they are cold and unyielding, his hands stinging from the effort. Jason swings his broken branch again, but it snaps in half, and the pieces are swallowed by the shifting earth. Emily clings to Sarah, her eyes wide with terror, as she whispers that she can hear the faces in the trees begging for help. The whispering voices are now a constant scream, filling the air with a sound that makes their ears ring and their heads ache. The ground beneath their feet trembles, and the mist grows so thick that they can barely see each other. The friends realize that the forest is not just alive, it is angry, and it wants to keep them here forever. The sense of hopelessness is crushing, and they all feel as if they are being buried alive by the roots of the forest. Suddenly, the roots begin to move, reaching out like fingers to grab at their legs and arms. Mark shouts for everyone to run, but there is nowhere to go. Jason tries to pull Emily free as a root wraps around her ankle. Sarah screams as another root brushes her face, cold and wet, like the touch of something dead. The friends fight with everything they have, kicking and pulling at the roots as the forest tries to drag them down into the earth. The whispering voices become a deafening roar, and the faces in the bark seem to watch with hungry eyes. Mark finally manages to break free, pulling Jason and Emily with him. Sarah stumbles, but Mark grabs her hand just in time. The friends collapse on the ground, gasping for breath as the roots retreat back into the earth, the wall of wood slowly sinking away, leaving only the echo of screams in the mist. The sense of dread is overwhelming, and they realize that the forest will not stop until it has claimed them all. The friends stagger away from the retreating roots, their bodies shaking with exhaustion and fear. The mist is so thick now that they can barely see their own hands in front of their faces. Mark leads the way, his voice hoarse, as he urges everyone to keep moving, but every direction the same. The trees are twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching out like claws. The ground is soft and uneven, and every step feels like it could be their last. Jason tries to mark the trees as they go, but the symbols disappear as soon as he turns away, replaced by new carvings that seem to shift and change when no one is looking. Emily clings to Sarah, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps as she whispers that she can hear footsteps following them. The friends realize that the forest is not just trying to trap them, it is trying to confuse them, to make them lose all sense of direction and hope. The whispering voices are everywhere now, echoing through the trees and filling their heads with fear and doubt. As they wander through the maze of trees, the friends begin to lose track of time. The sun is gone, and the darkness is absolute every now and then they hear footsteps behind them. But when they turn, there is nothing there, only the endless rows of trees and the shifting shadows. Mark tries to keep everyone together, but the forest seems to pull them apart. With every step, Jason starts to lag behind, his eyes glazed, as he listens to the voices calling his name. Emily and Sarah cling to each other, their faces pale with fear. The friends realize that they are walking in circles, passing the same twisted tree again and again. The sense of hopelessness is crushing, and they all feel as if they will never escape the nightmare. The whispering voices grow louder, now chanting in a language none of them understand. The friends cling to each other, desperate for any sign of hope, as the forest closes in tighter around them. The friends move deeper into the endless maze of the forest, their minds fraying as exhaustion and fear take hold. The mist is so thick that it feels like they are walking through a dream. Every sound is muffled, and every shadow seems to move on its own. Mark tries to keep everyone focused, but his own vision blurs at the edges, and he starts to see shapes moving just beyond the reach of his flashlight. Jason stumbles and grabs a tree for support, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he whispers that he can see his mother standing between the trees, her arms open and her face twisted in sorrow. Emily clings to Sarah, her eyes wide with terror, as she sees her little sister running through the mist, calling her name. The friends realize that the forest is not just trying to trap them, it is trying to break their minds, to make them doubt what is real and what is not. The whispering voices are now a constant presence, filling their heads with memories and fears that do not belong to them. As the hallucinations grow stronger, the friends begin to lose touch with reality. Hears his father's voice calling him deeper into the woods. Jason sees his mother's face in every shadow. Emily feels her sister's hand pulling her away. from the group, and Sarah hears her grandmother's lullaby echoing through the trees. The friends try to hold on to each other, but the forest seems to pull them apart. With every step, the ground shifts beneath their feet, and the trees twist and change shape when no one is looking. The whispering voices grow louder, now chanting in a language none of them understand. The friends realize that they are not just lost in the forest, they are lost in their own minds. The sense of terror is overwhelming, and they cling to each other, desperate for any sign of hope. As the nightmare closes in around them, the friends stumble through the forest, their bodies weak, and their minds on the edge of collapse. Mark tries to lead, but his hands are shaking, and his voice is barely more than a whisper. Jason follows close behind, his eyes darting from shadow to shadow as if expecting something to leap out at any moment. Emily clings to Sarah, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps as she whispers that she cannot tell what is real anymore. The hallucinations are everywhere now, ghostly figures of loved ones reaching out from the mist, faces twisted in sorrow or anger. The whispering voices are a constant roar, filling their heads with doubt and fear. The ground shifts beneath their feet, and the trees seem to close in tighter with every step. The friends realize that they are not just lost in the forest, they are lost in their own minds, and the sense of hopelessness is crushing. Mark tries to rally everyone, telling them they have to keep moving, but his own fear is written all over his face. Suddenly the hallucinations become too much for Jason. He drops to his knees, clutching his head as the voices scream inside his mind. Mark rushes to his side, trying to pull him up, but Jason's eyes are wild with terror. Emily and Sarah cling to each other, their own hallucinations swirling around them. The forest seems to pulse with a dark energy, the ground trembling as if alive. The friends realize that they are at the breaking point, that if they give in to the fear, they will be lost forever. Mark shouts at everyone to hold on to each other, to remember who they are and not let the forest win. The friends form a tight circle, their hands locked together as the hallucinations swirl around them. The whispering voices reach a fever pitch, and the sense of dread is overwhelming. But in that moment, the friends refuse to let go, clinging to each other as the nightmare rages around them. The friends hold tightly to each other, forming a circle in the heart of the nightmare forest. The mist swirls around them, and the hallucinations press closer, ghostly faces of loved ones and strangers alike reaching out with pleading hands. Mark's voice is hoarse as he tells everyone to focus on the sound of each other's breathing, to remember who they are and why they have to survive. Jason's hands tremble, but he squeezes Mark's arm, refusing to let go. Emily buries her face in Sarah's shoulder, whispering that she is scared, but she will not give up. The whispering voices are now a deafening roar, filling the air with threats and promises. The ground shakes and the trees bend as if the entire forest is trying to crush them. The friends close their eyes and focus on the warmth of each other's touch, blocking out the nightmare as best they can. The sense of terror is overwhelming, but for the first time, there is a flicker of defiance in their hearts. As the friends hold on, the hallucinations begin to falter, the ghostly figures flicker and fade, the whispering voices grow confused, and then angry. The forest shakes with rage, the mist thickening until it is impossible to see anything, but the friends refuse to let go. Mark shouts that they will not be broken, that they will not let the forest win. Emily and Sarah echo his words, their voices growing stronger. With every breath the ground cracks beneath them, and the trees groan as if in pain. But the friends stand firm, their hands locked together. The nightmare rages around them, but inside the circle, there is a small island of hope. The sense of dread is still there, but it is no longer in control. The friends realize that as long as they have each other, they can fight back against the darkness. Even as they never escape, they will not be lost to the fear. The friends stand together in their circle of defiance, but the forest is not finished with them. The ground shakes violently beneath their feet, and the trees groan and twist as if in agony. The mist thickens until it is almost impossible to breathe. Mark shouts for everyone to stay together, his voice barely audible over the roar of the wind that suddenly whips through the trees. Branches snap and leaves swirl around them. A living storm grips Mark's arm, his knuckles white with fear. Emily and Sarah cling to each other, their eyes squeezed shut as the air grows colder and the darkness presses in. The whispering voices return, now screaming in rage and pain. The ghostly faces in the mist contort into masks of fury, reaching out with clawed hands that seem to pass right through the friends. The sense of being hunted is overwhelming, and the friends realize that the forest is fighting back with everything it has, determined to break their will and claim them forever. Suddenly, the ground splits open beneath their feet, and a deep chasm yawns wide, threatening to swallow them whole. Mark pulls everyone back just in time. As the earth crumbles at the edge of their circle, the friends scramble to stay together, their hands locked as the chasm widens and the mist pours in. Jason nearly slips, but Emily grabs his arm, pulling him back to safety. The whispering voices reach a fever pitch, screaming in a language of them understand. The friends realize that the forest is trying to separate them one last time, to break the bond that has kept them alive. Mark shouts for everyone to hold on, no matter what. The friends press closer together, their bodies shaking. As the nightmare rages around them, the sense of dread is suffocating, but their determination is stronger, and for the first time, they feel a glimmer of hope that they might survive the night. The friends cling to each other at the edge of the chasm, their bodies shaking as the forest rages around them. The mist swirls faster, and the wind howls through the trees, carrying with it the voices of loved ones calling out in desperation. Mark hears his father's voice begging him to let go and come home, and hears his mother promising that everything will be all right. Emily hears her little sister crying for help, and Sarah hears her grandmother singing a lullaby. The voices are so real, so full of longing and pain, that for a moment each friend feels the urge to let go and step into the mist. The hallucinations return stronger than ever, ghostly figures of family and friends reaching out from the darkness, their faces twisted in sorrow and hope. The friends realize that the forest is offering them one last chance to give in to the fear, to surrender to the nightmare and be lost forever. Mark feels his grip loosening as his father's voice grows louder, promising peace and safety. Jason's knees buckle as his mother's arms seem to reach for him from the mist. Emily sobs as her sister's face appears just beyond the edge of the chasm. Sarah sways as her grandmother's lullaby fills her ears. The friends are on the verge of letting go, their minds clouded by longing and exhaustion. But at the last moment, Mark shouts that it is not real, that the forest is lying to them. Jason, Emily, and Sarah snap back to reality, their hands locking tighter than ever. The ghostly figures fade away, their faces twisting in anger and disappointment. The wind dies down, and the mist begins to thin. The friends realize that they have passed the final test, that their will to survive is stronger than the forest's power. The sense of dread lingers, but for the first time, there is a sense of victory in their hearts. The friends stand together at the edge of the chasm, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and relief. As the mist finally begins to lift, the forest is still dark and twisted, but the suffocating pressure that has haunted them for so long seems to ease just a little. Mark looks around, his breath coming in ragged gasps, as he realizes that the ground beneath their feet has stopped shaking. The trees are no longer groaning in anger, and the ghostly faces in the mist have faded into shadows. Jason wipes tears from his eyes, his hands still locked tightly with Mark's. Emily and Sarah cling to each other, their faces streaked with dirt and fear. But for the first time, there is a glimmer of hope in their eyes. As the mist thins, a faint path appears winding through the trees and away from the chasm. The friends hesitate, afraid that it might be another trick of the forest, but Mark whispers that they have no choice if they want to survive. With trembling legs, the friends step onto the path, their hands still locked together. As they move slowly through the forest, every sound makes them jump, and every shadow seems to hide a new threat. But the path remains clear, winding between the ancient trees and away from the nightmare. They have endured. The whispering voices are still there, but they are softer now, fading into the background, as if the forest knows it has lost its hold on them. Mark leads the way, his eyes fixed on the faint light that seems to grow brighter with every step. Jason follows close behind, his grip never loosening. Emily and Sarah walk side by side, their arms around each other. The friends realize that they have survived the worst the forest could throw at them, but the sense of dread never fully leaves their hearts as they move forward into the unknown. The friends follow the faint path through the forest, their bodies aching and their minds haunted by everything they have seen and heard. The mist continues to thin, and the pale golden light glows ahead, just beyond the reach of the twisted trees. Mark leads the way, his heart pounding with a mix of hope and fear. Jason walks close behind his eyes, darting to every shadow. Emily and Sarah cling to each other, their steps slow and careful, as if afraid the ground might vanish beneath their feet. The whispering voices are almost gone now, replaced by a deep silence that feels just as unnatural. The friends move forward together, their hands never letting go. As the light grows brighter and the trees begin to thin, the sense of dread lingers in the air. But for the first time, it is matched by a fragile hope that they might finally be free of the nightmare. As they draw closer to the light, the friends begin to notice strange changes in the forest. The trees are less twisted, and the ground feels firmer beneath their feet. The air is warmer, and the silence is broken only by the distant sound of running. Mark slows his pace, his eyes wide, as he realizes that the path is leading them toward a clearing bathed in golden light. Jason squeezes his shoulder, whispering that they might finally be safe. Emily and Sarah cling to each other, tears streaming down their faces as they step into the clearing. The friends stand together in the light, their bodies trembling with relief and disbelief. The nightmare forest looms behind them, but for the first time, they feel the weight of its darkness begin to lift. The sense of dread is still there, but it is fading, replaced by the hope that they have survived something no one else could ever understand. The friends stand in the golden clearing, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and relief. But as their eyes adjust to the light, they begin to notice that something is not right. The grass beneath their feet is too green, and the flowers that bloom at the edge of the clearing are colors they have never seen before. The air is warm and sweet, but it carries a strange undertone that makes their skin crawl. Mark looks around, his heart pounding. He realizes that the trees at the edge of the clearing are still twisted and dark, their branches reaching out like claws. Jason whispers that it feels like they are being watched even here in the light. Emily clings to Sarah, her eyes wide, as she notices that the shadows at the edge of the clearing are moving on their own. The friends realize that the clearing is not a place of safety, but another part of the forest's nightmare, a trap disguised as hope. The sense of dread returns stronger than ever, and they all feel as if they are standing in the center of something ancient and hungry. Suddenly, the light in the clearing begins to shift, growing colder and more artificial. The flowers close, and the grass seems to wilt beneath their feet. The shadows at the edge of the clearing grow longer, stretching toward the friends like fingers. Mark tries to lead everyone back to the path, but the way they came is gone, replaced by a wall of mist and darkness. Jason shouts for help, but his voice is swallowed by the silence. Emily and Sarah cling to each other as the shadows creep closer, their shapes twisting into faces that leer and grin. The friends realize that the clearing is not an escape, but the heart of the forest's power, a place where hope is used to lure victims deeper into the nightmare. The sense of terror is overwhelming, and they all feel as if they are about to be consumed by the darkness that has haunted them from the very beginning. The friends huddle together in the center of the clearing. As the light fades and the shadows creep closer, the air grows colder, and the sweet scent of the flowers turns sour. Mark tries to keep everyone calm, but his own voice is shaking. Jason stands with his back to the others, his eyes fixed on the wall of mist that now surrounds them. Emily clings to Sarah, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps as she whispers that she can see faces in the darkness. The shadows at the edge of the clearing twist and writhe, forming long arms and clawed hands that reach for the friends. The ground beneath their feet begins to tremble, and the grass wilts away, leaving only cold, hard earth. The whispering voices return, now deeper and more menacing than ever, chanting in a language who of them understand. The friends realize that they are standing in the very heart of the forest's nightmare, a place where hope and fear are twisted together into something ancient and evil. Suddenly, the ground splits open beneath their feet, and the cold wind howls up from the darkness below. Mark grabs Jason's arm, pulling him back from the edge. As the earth crumbles away, Emily screams as a clawed hand brushes her ankle, and Sarah pulls her close. The friends scramble to stay together, their hands locked. As the clearing collapses around them, the shadows surge, Forward, their faces twisted in rage and hunger, the whispering voices rise to a deafening roar, and the friends realize that the forest is trying to drag them down into the darkness forever. Mark shouts for everyone to hold on to each other, to fight back against the nightmare. The friends form a tight circle, their bodies shaking as the shadows close in. The sense of terror is overwhelming, but in that moment they refuse to let go, clinging to each other as the darkness tries to claim them. The friends cling to each other as the clearing collapses around them. The shadows surge forward, their clawed hands reaching for any exposed skin. Shouts for everyone to stay together, his voice barely audible over the roar of the wind and the screams of the whispering voices. Jason grips Mark's arm, his knuckles white with fear. Emily and Sarah hold each other tightly, their eyes squeezed shut as the darkness presses in. The ground shakes violently, and the air is filled with the stench of decay. The friends feel the cold touch of the shadows as they brush against their arms and legs, leaving behind a numbness that spreads through their bodies. The faces in the darkness leer and grin, their mouths open in silent screams. The friends realize that this is the final test, that the forest will not let them go without a fight. The sense of terror is overwhelming, but they refuse to let go, clinging to each other as the nightmare rages around them. As the shadows close in, the friends focus on the sound of each other's voices. Mark shouts that they have to fight back, that they cannot let the forest win. In echoes his words, his voice growing stronger with every breath. Emily and Sarah join in, their voices rising above the roar of the wind and the screams of the shadows. The friends form a circle, their hands locked together as they push back against the darkness. The ground cracks and the shadows recoil, their faces twisting in pain and anger. The whispering voices falter and the wind begins to die down. The friends realize that their unity is stronger than the nightmare, that as long as they hold on to each other, they cannot be broken. The sense of dread is still there, but it is no longer in control. The friends stand together in the heart of the darkness, refusing to be lost to the fear. The friends stand together in the shattered clearing, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and fear, but their hands never let go. The shadows swirl around them slower, and now as if weakened by the strength of their unity. Up and for the first time in what feels like an eternity, he sees a faint glow on the horizon, a pale light that pushes back the darkness. Jason squeezes Mark's arm, his eyes wide with hope. Emily and Sarah cling to each other, their faces streaked with tears as they watch the mist begin to thin. The whispering voices are still there, but they are softer now, fading into the background. As the light grows stronger, the ground stops shaking and the air grows warmer. The friends realize that the nightmare is not over, but something is changing. The forest is losing its grip on them, and the first rays of dawn are breaking through the twisted branches above. As the light grows brighter, the shadows retreat, hissing and twisting as they vanish into the depths of the forest. The friends move slowly toward the edge of the clearing, their steps unsteady but determined. The mist lifts and the trees begin to look less twisted. The air is filled with the sound of birdsong. For the first time since their nightmare began, leads the way, his heart pounding with hope. Jason follows close behind, his grip never loosening. Emily and Sarah walk side by side, their arms around each other. The friends realize that they have survived the worst the forest could throw at them, but the sense of dread never fully leaves their hearts as they step into the light. The nightmare is over, but the memory of what they endured will haunt them forever. The friends move slowly through the thinning trees, their bodies aching and their minds haunted by the horrors. They have survived. The forest is no longer twisted and dark, but the memory of the nightmare clings to every shadow. Mark leads the way, his eyes fixed on the growing light ahead. Jason follows close behind, his hand never leaving Mark's arm. Emily and Sarah walk together, their arms wrapped around each other for comfort. The air is fresh and the birds sing, but every sound makes the friends flinch, as if expecting the whispering voices to return. The path beneath their feet is soft and clear, but the friends cannot shake the feeling that the forest is watching them, waiting for a moment of weakness. The sense of dread is still there, lurking just beneath the surface. As they move closer to the edge of the woods, as they reach the edge of the forest, the friends stop and look back at the trees. The mist is gone and the sun shines through the branches. but the shadows seem deeper than they should be. Mark takes a deep breath, his heart pounding as he realizes that they have made it out alive. Jason squeezes his shoulder. Emily and Sarah hold each other tightly, tears streaming down their faces. The friends step out of the woods into the open air, the nightmare behind them, but the memory of what they endured will never leave them. They know that the forest is still. They're waiting for the next lost soul to wander too far from the path. The sense of horror lingers as they walk away, the friends forever changed by the darkness they survived. The friends walk away from the edge of the forest, their bodies weak, and their minds heavy with everything they have endured. The sunlight feels strange on their skin, almost too bright. After so many hours lost in darkness, Mark glances back one last time at the wall of trees. The shadows between the trunks seem to shift, as if something is still watching them, and walks beside him silent and pale, his eyes fixed on the ground. Emily and Sarah hold each other close, their faces streaked with tears as they try to make sense of what has happened. The world outside the forest feels unreal. The sounds of birds and the warmth of the sun, a distant memory compared to the nightmare they survived. Every step away from the woods feels like a victory, but also a reminder that some part of them will always be lost in that darkness. The friends know that no one will ever believe what they have seen and heard, but the fear in their hearts is real, and it will never truly leave them. As they reach the safety of the open field, the friends stop and look at each other, searching for comfort in familiar faces, but all they see is the reflection of their own fear. Mark tries to smile, but his lips tremble. Jason puts a hand on his shoulder, and for a moment they stand in silence. Emily wipes her tears and Sarah whispers that they are safe now, but the words sound hollow. The friends know that the forest is still there, waiting for the next lost soul to wander too far from the path. The memory of the whispering voices and the shifting shadows will haunt their dreams for years to come, and every time they hear the wind in the trees or see a patch of mist in the morning light, they will remember the nightmare that almost claimed them. The sense of horror truly fades, and the friends walk on forever, changed by the darkness that lives just beyond the edge of the woods.